There you go.
And we're live! Yay! Hello, everybody. Happy New Year to you, Miss Marie, and everybody else, for that matter.
Karen.
So, Karen and
Exclaimed. Exclaimed
Miss
staff.
Angie and Robin. Thank you for joining us.
See a couple of people. Good to see you guys. Happy New Year.
Good to see you. So we fully intended to be here last Thursday, which was New Year's Day, but my dad had a sudden emergency, and I spent New Year's Day in the hospital. Not me personally, but with him in the ER. But he's okay now. He's doing fine right now. So, but yeah, chilly Ojai. Yeah, you guys are going to get pretty frosty for these parts. Okay, so yeah. So thanks, Robin. So, but yeah. So anyway. But we're back. We're back. We had anticipated, obviously, not being here on Christmas, but we had fully intended to be here on New Year's. But nonetheless, we are back. And boy, we missed not being here last week. We really wanted to be here and do our broadcast. But you know, things happen. So, but like I said, my dad is doing well. So we are going to continue with our study of Deuteronomy. We're in chapter 15, the second part of chapter 15. And if y'all want to,
I'm going to put over that screen.
There we go.
Right now.
There we go. We're going to pick up the narrative in in verse 12. So, but a real quick commercial. If you're in the area, the Long Beach area, or just here in Long Beach, West Orange County,
Southern California,
Lakewood, yeah.
Anywhere where you feel like driving to join us, is that where you're leading to?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So yeah. So this coming Saturday is our
Christian Open Mic
Christian
Night.
Open Mic Night, our coffee house / Christian Open Mic Night, and that'll get underway at 6 p.m. at the Cozy Crepes Cafe in Lakewood, Long Beach area. So if you're interested in that, send us a text or just show up. Just show up. And it should be a lot of fun, and we have a great time. So 6 p.m. this Saturday at Cozy Crepes Cafe in Lakewood.
It's, I'll put the address on here.
Yeah, Gay's going to put the address on here on our
on your screen here in a second.
There. So
4203 Monterre Avenue. 4203? Yeah.
4203 Monterre Avenue. Just a few, like a block and a half west of Bellflower and north of Carson. So anyway, love to have you join us. But so that's coming up this Saturday. But now it's been a while, but we're continuing on with Deuteronomy chapter 15. And Moses is giving instructions from God to the people. As usual, as we said, this is preparatory. These sermons are sermons, but they're preparation for when the Israelites move into the promised land. So there's been all kinds of rules, regulations. A lot of it is a repeating. I say repeating, but it's reiterating is a better way of saying it. What God has already spoken to the people and instructions, and basically he is instructing them so that they can have a functional, well-established, orderly society that puts him first, and in doing so pulls them up into a much better place than the pagan tribes surrounding them. So without further ado, let us jump into verses 12 and 13. So Moses is going, or God is going to, through Moses, is going to be addressing the topic of servitude, okay? And many translations use the term slave, and we as Americans, most North Americans, we bristle at that whole idea. We bristle, or we kind of pause and we come to attention and the whole concept of slavery just doesn't sit well with us. So hello, Miss Carolyn. So doesn't sit well with us because of our American history, actually, by and large, and the horrific associations with the term slavery. But here in the Bible, in the Old Testament, slavery means something vastly different. Okay, it is talking about, or at least Moses here is talking about, the idea of voluntary servitude. Not necessarily voluntary, because people were forced into circumstances that utter poverty, but there was a way out. There was a societal way out, and that was to enter into a relationship where you would essentially work off your debt, okay, or whatever it is that you needed to work off. So that's what we're talking about here. So starting in verse 12, you want to read that, Doc?
Sure. Verse 12, if your fellow countryman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, then he shall serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year you shall set him free, and when you set him free, you shall not send him away empty-handed.
Now this sounds
pretty cool,
pretty terrible to us perhaps, but it's actually amazingly progressive for the time in which it was written, in which slaves, actual slaves who were taken by force against their will, were taken into captivity and subjected to horrific treatment, literally considered property. And the same concept was women were very often held in the same set of circumstances, and so on and so forth. God is saying, you're not going to be like those people. You are different. You are set apart. And if someone is sold to you or enters into a contractual relationship with you where they're going to work off their debt or such, then there are limitations to that. There are limitations that do not exist in the other cultures surrounding you. Well, hello, Rich. Good to see you on board. So glad you joined us. If you missed the first part, we were supposed to be here last Sunday or Thursday, but we had some emergency circumstances. Not us, but my father. All is good. So, but thanks for joining us. Can you explain the phrase "sold to you"? Enter into a marketing agreement. Enter into the concept of, I will become your servant in exchange for decreasing my debt. Okay, so they're sold in the sense that that individual has sold their physical abilities, or they are selling their physical abilities in order to pay off a debt. That's what the term "sold to you" is meaning. So it's not referring to a slave trader or a slave a trafficker selling an individual to the highest bidder. This is more of a contractual obligation that is entered to between the servant to be, or the servant, and the head of the household, or I hesitate to say the term master, but that would be the correct terminology of the day. But the boss or the contract holder, okay, I guess lien holder might be a better way of saying it. So, but as Gay read, there are limitations. So even if somebody does do this, enters into this type of contract out of desperation, there's still limits. In the 7th year, they will be set free, and they're not to be set free empty-handed. So
right, that's what's really interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely remarkable for the time period, and totally unlike anything that existed around them.
Yeah, it would never, other cultures would never give a indentured servant some help finance their new life. Right, basically, is what God is saying. Like, you don't send them out, and they've been living at your place and being paid by you, but you need to go ahead and help finance their efforts to live on their own if they chose to go ahead and be
indentured free. Servant would be the proper term. Yes, Marie.
Right.
But
right. Yeah.
So, yeah, so that they're not sent away empty-handed. So, yeah, this is a reiteration of what was told or commanded of the Israelites in Leviticus chapter 25. So, and we did cover that when we talked about, when we studied Leviticus, the book of Leviticus. So, verse 14, here we go.
You shall give generously to him from your flock. This is how you're going to not send him out empty-handed. You shall give generously to him from your flock, your threshing floor, and from your wine vat. You shall give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you, and you are to remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I am commanding this of you today.
Okay. Now, we have two terms here. The indentured servant, or the servant, and we have the slave. Now, the Israelites had truly been slaves under the Egyptian system of rule. They had very little rights. Very little rights. They had opportunities, just like in American history. There were people who were sold into slavery and managed to purchase their way out of slavery and actually rise up into the United States government and or political realm and make a difference. So because we think of, well, the Israelites were slaves, but look at Joseph. Joseph rose up to become second in command to Pharaoh. Possibilities existed, yeah, but by and large, the population as a whole, they were not indentured servants. They were slaves, and they were forced to do all of the labor that the Egyptians did not want them to do. But God says, when that contract is up, when that 7-year period expires and the contract becomes null and void, you don't just send them away. You say, okay, time's up, see ya. You provide for them because they are, in fact, your brothers, your countrymen, your nation, your people. You're to provide for them. And notice it says your flock, your threshing floor, and your wine vat. So food and provisions. Okay, you don't just give them the dirty rags. You provide provisions for them so that they can start a new life. What an amazing thing. What an amazing thing. And what's the motivation? Because God is providing the Israelites with a new life. And he's doing so, and he's providing for them abundantly. They're going to enter the promised land, and God's already promised it'll be a land overflowing with milk and honey. They already have their flocks. They still have the riches. 40 years later, they still have the riches that they took from Egypt. Now, some of it was used for other purposes, but by and large, they are well equipped. So God did this for them, so they're to continue to carry out that spirit of generosity that God has given over them. So,
right. I like what Wearsby says. This law assumes that the man's 6 year of service was without a salary, but he had repaid his loan, and then so he hasn't been able to save money. So this was what God is saying. But once again, the Lord commanded generosity for the masters were to send their servants away bearing gifts that would help them start life over again, including livestock, grain, and wine. After all, when the Jews left Egypt, they received expensive gifts. Remember, basically it was like they plundered, but the Egyptians just poured it onto them, gave it willingly. They weren't stealing it or something, but they had gold and everything because the Egyptians wanted them out so badly because of the plagues. So they received expensive gifts in return for their years of enslavement. So why shouldn't a Jewish brother be rewarded for 6 years of faithful labor to a fellow Jew?
Right.
So that's, I mean, the precedent is, that's what's interesting, is there is a precedent. I mean, granted, this is the second generation he's talking to, but still, like when they were freed from slavery, 400 years of slavery in Egypt, God made sure that they were given many resources, and they were dragging it with them through the wilderness for 40 years. They were carrying, I mean, that's why they had the gold to build the tabernacle, once God told them how to make it. They needed fine linens, and they had all that because of what the Egyptians gave them, even though they had been slaves, So anyway, so there is a precedent that they experienced themselves. So that's why God says here, and remember, you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and God redeemed them, and they actually got expensive gifts when they were leaving.
So we have two questions. Rich asks, he says, why did it take them 40 years? Bad directions. No, they knew exactly where they ought to go. They knew exactly where they ought to go. But remember, they were following the pillar of fire and the cloud or the pillar of cloud.
Right, pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night.
They were following those, and God essentially led them in the wilderness and took them 40 years because they needed to be weaned of their bad habits and purified and instructed and equipped and all of those things. Just like, you join the military, you go to boot camp, and unless it's the most absolute dire circumstances, you're in the military, you go through boot camp to get you ready, to get you toughened up, to get you prepared for what you do. You enter a new job, you might be an intern, you graduate from medical school, you don't just start cutting on people, you follow around a trained, knowledgeable team of physicians to learn things. So mentorship is not unheard of just on the secular level, so God did the same for them. And then Robin's question is, didn't they make that to use the plunder to make the golden calf? They did indeed use some of it.
Yep, some of it, sure.
They did, but remember it talked about wagons full of plunder, or not plunder, but wagons full of goods that the Egyptians equipped them with. So even though the golden calf was made, it did not deplete them of their resources. So we still have the bad habits again. Yeah, exactly, Rich. We still have the bad habits. So verse 16. This is cool. I like this. This
but
is so cool.
It shall come about if he says to you, I will not leave you, because he loves you and your household, since he is doing well with you, then you shall take an awl and pierce it through his ear into the door, and he shall be your servant permanently. You shall also do the same to your female slave.
Right. So this indicates a relationship that would be highly unexpected if it was a brutal master-slave abusive situation. If it comes about at the end of the contractual period, if the indentured servant says, I don't want to leave this household, I love this family, I want to be a part of this family, then there's a ceremony. God provides a ceremony that allows that relationship to continue and takes it to a new level, if you will. And it's indicated by the piercing of the ear. And there's a little bit of symbolism there, because an awl or a sharp object is taken as the ear is pierced, the lobe of the ear is pierced, but it's done so on the threshold of the door, the jamb of the door. And so there would be the symbolism of it would be on display for all to see, the ceremony, but it would indicate that this person has moved from indentured servant to member of the household. Mm-hmm. Part of now they still might be managing whatever it was they were managing, or doing whatever it was they were doing, but they are doing it out of not out of compulsion or out of obligation to pay off a debt. They're doing it out of brotherhood, out of love, out of respect, out of a relationship. They're doing it out of that. So it's a wonderful, wonderful ceremony. But yeah, so God makes a provision for that because the whole idea is that the community takes care of the community. Right. So it's actually it's a lovely ceremony, if you will. So yeah, commentator, I think this is Meyer, he says it's rather lengthy, but it's well worth reading. It's a remarkable thing to think of this ceremony being carried out, the piercing of the ear. A servant said, I know I have fulfilled my obligations to my master, and I have served what I have owed. Yet I love my master, and I'm so grateful for what he has given me that I will gladly obligate myself for life, not out of debt or shame or defeat, but out of love. And this is the cruel part. This is the cruel part, because everything foreshadows Jesus.
Right.
Everything.
Exactly.
Right? Jesus is the great fulfillment of this willing slave. Jesus said prophetically in Psalm 40, verse 6, my ears you have opened. Ooh. It speaks of this opening of the ear of the bondservant ceremony. He was the willing bondservant of God the Father. Wow. How cool is that? And it goes on. Like the sailor driven out by the tempest, we have taken the first harbor that offered. But when we have tested the blessed Master and found him so sweet and so strong, we elect to remain with him, not for his gifts or even his salvation, but for himself. Not for his, we do not wish to go out free. We love him so dearly that we would rather go anywhere with him than remain without him. And the converse is true. In our Sunday morning study, and I think we did, and I just spoke on it this past Sunday here at 14:6. Max Lucado, in the preface to one of his books, he said, learning about the God who loves us so much that he was willing to die for us. He'd rather die than live without us. So same idea. Go anywhere, then remain without him. This resolve of ours is ratified by him. This desire is ratified through Jesus. His nails are our ears. He nails our ears to his cross. When we yield to him and we choose to listen to his voice and we choose to follow him. Through the blood of self-sacrifice and self-surrender, through our deeper appreciation of the meaning of his cross as separating us from the old selfish life. We say, you know what? It's so true. Think upon this situation. An individual gets into so much debt, they cannot get out of this situation. They sell themselves into servitude, right, to work off this debt. But then they realize that I love this master. This master has allowed me to survive, to live, to thrive. I want to align myself with them, okay? And they go through this ceremony saying, yes, I came into this household a debtor, wretched, poor, desperate, but now I want to be with you. That describes the gospel message perfectly. We are wretched and miserable and so lost without Jesus. But then we come to him out of desperation, perhaps, because our back is against the wall. We have nowhere else to go. And we said, well, I turn to you, Jesus. Fix this. Mm-hmm. And he does. Mm-hmm. And then we're like, our hearts are changed. We're changed in that instant. We're changed, and we realize he saved me when nothing else could, and no one else would. Why would I ever leave him? The ceremony sort of foreshadows that. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Robin asked the question, would the ceremony leave blood on the doorpost like it was put there? Somewhat, yeah, somewhat. It would be a reminder. At the very least, there would be a nail hole or an awl hole. There would be a hole in the door. That would be a subtle reminder of what happened there. So yeah, Robin, that's a great point. I like he nails our ears to his cross.
Right, it says that.
Absolutely,
He nails our ear to his cross. That's a great
absolutely,
line.
Yeah, it's a great line. It's so true. When we finally get it,
right.
We finally get it. You know, we turn to Jesus out of desperation, out of terror, out of sheer just our back against the wall, and then we come to that point where I want to hear his voice. I want to know Scripture. I want to follow his ways, because that is such a sweet sound to my ear and my heart. So yeah, Robin, Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's an amazing foreshadowing of what Jesus does for each and every believer. It's incredible.
Did you see her thing about? Is it like the doorpost? Okay, that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
So, verse 18.
It shall not seem difficult for you when you set him free, because he has given you 6 years with double the service of a hired worker. So the Lord your God will bless you in whatever you do. So this is the thing, like when people are hearing, like, what? I have to give a servant, like, goods, from my own, field, from my table, from my stores, from my household. But God's saying, if you are generous, like we've all experienced, God will bless it back to you. Whatever you give to the church, or whatever you give, it's the application today, we want to hold on to our pennies, but whatever we tithe to the Lord, I mean, he ends up giving it back to us in many ways, and multiple times greater than what we gave out, right? So, yeah. I mean, that's what God's saying here, like, I will bless you. Your God will bless you when you give out to this worker. It won't be a hardship.
Right.
You're not going to run short. You're not going to be out, now I can't feed my family because I gave the slave all that stuff. Dang it.
Uh-oh. We're in the dark. So
I don't know where the sensor is.
So I'll turn the lights back on. But yeah, think about it in this terms. The individual is coming to us, or he's coming to you, or the individual, he's coming to the quote unquote master in a desperate situation. And but there's also a social welfare aspect to this whole thing, because he's coming out of desperation, but he knows that he's going to get fed. He's going to have a roof over his head. He is going to be protected, because he or she or his family are going to be provided for, and in turn he will give his service. He ought to be giving it out of gratitude. Karen says, the Apostle Paul called himself a bondservant. He willingly dedicated his whole life to the service of Christ. Amen and amen. And that ought to be our attitudes also, right? A true convert, a true disciple of Christ, a true follower of Jesus and the Bible ought to understand that.
Now Paul's turning them on, because I just told him the lights went out.
Oh.
Well, we can turn them back on. This I know how to do. What I need to know is where the sensor is, so it doesn't happen again.
It's over there. It's facing the other way, though. But
there's only one sensor? No, I mean, there's one that he puts on the table.
So, but yeah, a bondservant, that idea, a willing bondservant, and Paul was a willing bondservant. Now think about that for a minute. We know from scriptures, from the book of Acts alone, we know that Paul faced unimaginable, by our standards, unimaginable hardships. Okay, beatings, scourgings, imprisonment, shipwreck, being cast out, being driven out of town, all kinds of hardship. Yet he continued willingly, because he valued so much the relationship that he had with the Lord. And that's what I'm saying, is that yeah. So it shall not seem difficult when you set an individual free, because you have made a way. You have helped this individual in the worst of their times. You have allowed them to work in your home, and you essentially provided for them. So no, it shouldn't be difficult for you. You shouldn't do it grudgingly. You've helped a brother or a sister through an incredibly difficult time. It should be a joy. It should be a joy. So it's talking about the mutual benefit of this relationship. So it's actually a really, really phenomenal thing. So if you think about it. Moving on, verse 19, the topic is shifting now.
You shall consecrate to the Lord your God all the firstborn males that are born in your herd and in your flock, and you shall not work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock.
Okay. Now this gets a little unusual to us. Yeah. Before we go on, Karen says, Paul had deep humility and devotion in his service for the Lord. Absolutely. Yes, yes, indeed. So now we've shifted the topic, and this is a requirement. This comes back again from Leviticus. It's talking about consecrating or setting apart, setting aside the firstborn males of the herd or of the situation from your flock. He's speaking specifically of the animals, okay, that are born in your herd. So if a ewe, the first time the ewe gives birth to a lamb, if it's a male, it should be set apart. Okay, if it's an ox or a donkey, it shall be set apart. Okay, and it will not be worked like a draft animal, like the other animals were, and it won't be shorn like the other sheep would be. Okay, here we go.
You and your household shall eat it every year before the Lord your God in the place where the Lord chooses. But if it has any impairment, such as a limp or blindness or any serious impairment, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God.
Okay, so the lamb and the oxen that were born, they would be set apart. They were specifically to be set apart to be an offering meal. They would not be draft animals. They would not be milking animal, or well, they'd be males, so that's out of the question. But they wouldn't be wool-producing animals. They were specifically to be raised, and then annually, so their lives would indeed be short, but they would be set apart to be animals specifically intended for as sacrificial animals, provided they did not have any major imperfections. Okay, so if they had major imperfections, they were disqualified from being sacrificial animals. Okay, assuming that they meet the criteria, then they're to be eaten, and then verse 22 elaborates on that.
You shall eat it within your gates. The unclean and the clean alike may eat it as a gazelle or a deer, only you shall not eat its blood. You are to pour it out on the ground like water. Okay,
so it's to be a sacrificial animal. When it says eat it within your gates, that means you do not have to go to, or if it's the blemished one, you can eat it. You can eat it as part of your sustenance. Okay. However, as with all the things, the Jews were forbidden from eating anything that had blood in it. So it must be properly slaughtered and prepared. We would say today, prepared in a kosher manner. Okay. Here we go. Commentary, Murrow. The offering of the firstborn is qualified further by the stipulation that it must be as near a perfect specimen as possible. And that's reiterating Deuteronomy. This is not so much that, this is important. This is not so much because God does not love and accept the flawed and the failed, but because the offerer must be prepared to part with what is most valuable to him. A perfect animal in an agricultural environment would fetch a higher price. Okay, that's just human nature and good business sense and logic. There is little sacrifice in giving up something that has little or no market value anyway. Okay, so again, it's to focus on God first. You don't give him the leftovers. You give him the valuable.
Right, the cream of the crop.
The cream of the crop.
Right.
Hence, Sunday being the first day of the week, that's the day we set aside to worship God. Okay, whoa, what just happened? So, not sure what just happened. So we just lost the screen, but that's okay. We are going to continue on. We have a backup screen. We have backups. Okay, so.
What the heck?
Yeah, but something weird just happened. But anyway, so that brings us into believe it or not, chapter 16 of Deuteronomy. And we're back. Ha. So that was weird. So, okay. So now that finishes up chapter 15, and we move into, man, all kinds of electronic stuff is going on here. Oh, speaking of that, the good news is that
I'll be back. I'm looking for the sensor because I'm not going to sit through the dark again.
The good news is that
good thing.
Construction has started, and we are, as we speak, there's a large trench. Things are dug up, and they're laying the piping for an additional bathroom. I just spoke to the electrician before we came online today, and he has run new wiring where there needs to be new wiring. And in just a couple of days, they're going to start construction, and we've got all kinds of stuff happening here at 14.6. So buckle up, because amazing things are happening here. So, but as with any construction project, there are little glitches, and we just experienced a couple of them today. So, but we're moving forward. So, chapter 16, book of Deuteronomy. Here we go. Verse 1.
Observe the month of Abib and celebrate the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night.
Okay, and so we know that Passover is a movable feast, if you will. It changes because it's on a lunar schedule, not a solar calendar like we just celebrated. Well, New Year's doesn't really follow a solar calendar per se, but roughly it does. Okay, but we just celebrated the New Year. Okay, and the Jews would celebrate the New Year and such based on the lunar calendar, and also based on the seasonality of harvest and things of that nature. So, and by celebrating it in the month of Abib, okay, it's always to, again, remind them that that was when God brought them out. The Passover is when God brought them out of slavery. Okay? Just like we celebrate Christmas, and there are endless debates as to when was Christmas really, when did it really happen? It's somewhat irrelevant. It matters, but it's somewhat irrelevant. But it's to remind us that Jesus came. That's the point of Christmas. If we're off by a day or two, that's not a disaster, because the Bible isn't emphatic about the specific day. But it's to remind us. It's to remind us of what God did by bringing Jesus to, or by having Jesus come to earth. So, verse 2.
You shall sacrifice the Passover to the Lord your God from the flock and the herd in the place where the Lord chooses to establish his name. You shall not eat leavened bread with it. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in a hurry, so that you will remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life.
Right. Okay. And of course, if you were with us during our study of in Exodus of the Passover and all of the implications of that, and the purpose of the unleavened bread, because there wasn't time, it was to be an indicator of the lack of time. And even to today, many churches use matzah crackers when they do communion, and we've heard Messianic Jews give these wonderful expositions on what matzah crackers or matzah bread, the squares of cracker, what they indicate from the hardness that crumbles when it's broken, to the little holes that are in the matzah, to the browning on the outside. And it's to remind us of Jesus, actually.
Right.
So, and Messianic Jews see that. Non-Messianic Jews, they miss out on that, actually. Okay.
Well, right. Well, they just see it as what God's commanding them to do here.
Right.
You know, it's the bread of affliction.
Right.
Because they left Egypt in a hurry, so there wasn't time for the bread to rise.
Right.
In that,
So yes.
That's all they see.
Nonetheless, so God is reiterating to the second generation as they stand preparing to go into the promised land, he's reiterating that, once you cross over that Jordan River, all that stuff that we've been doing for 40 years, or with all that stuff that I've been telling you about for 40 years, you need to start doing it. You need to start doing it. You need to implement it. You need to do it, and you need to do it correctly. Okay? First Corinthians 5:7 even reminds us to clean out the old leaven so that you may be a new lump of dough, just as you are in fact unleavened. For Christ our Passover also has been sacrificed. Okay? It's to remind us, we become Christian. God accepts us as we are, but he loves us too much to let us stay that way. So don't forget that. Don't forget that. Verse 4.
For 7 days no leaven shall be seen with you in your entire territory, and none of the meat which you sacrifice on the evening of the first day shall be left overnight until the morning.
Okay, again, and that's in accordance with how the first Passover meal was to be prepared and celebrated. Okay, no leaven for a week. Okay, no leaven in the house. No leaven in the country, actually. Okay, and somebody was telling us that they were over in Israel even to this day, and you cannot find leaven during the appropriate time of the year. It just does not exist. Not even in foreign restaurants or anything. It ain't there.
Right.
So yeah, it's like nobody does it, whether or not they're Jewish. There is no leaven in the country.
Right.
So yeah, and then the meat was to be consumed, and what was not consumed was to be burned. Okay, what was not to be consumed was to be consumed. Okay, verse 20. What happened? Oh no. Verse 5. Oh, okay, there we go.
I don't know what happened.
Wow, that's weird.
20 in there somewhere?
I guess so. That's weird.
Okay, verse 5. Hopefully it's the right verse. You are not allowed to sacrifice the Passover in any of your towns which the Lord your God is giving you, but only at the place where the Lord your God chooses to establish his name. You shall sacrifice the Passover in the evening at sunset at the time that you came out of Egypt, the month of Abib.
Right. So unlike today where we might we do celebrate our Easter dinners and such like that in our homes with our families, in restaurants, in parks, all over the place. God is saying that this ceremony is of such import, and it is such a powerful time of remembrance and sacrifice that you can't just do it willy-nilly. Okay, you can't just go over to Auntie Sarah's house and have Passover. You have to celebrate the Passover at this time in history at the temple or the designated places throughout the country. Okay, so God is saying you will gather as a people because I led you out as a people. I led you out as a people, and you are to gather as a people to celebrate this Passover. Okay. Verse 7.
You shall cook and eat it in the place which the Lord your God chooses. In the morning you are to return to your tents. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a festive assembly to the Lord your God, and you shall do no work on it.
Okay, so there's a ceremony for 6 days. It lasts for 6 days. The Passover kicks it off, and for 6 days it's a time of remembrance and recalling what the Passover actually means, and then it culminates in a festive assembly or with lots of singing and music playing and things of that nature. Verse 9.
You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. You shall begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. Then you shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with a voluntary offering of your hand in a proportional amount, which you shall give just as the Lord your God blesses you.
Okay, so 7 weeks, 7 times 7 is 49. We know sevens are special numbers in God's economy. Okay, and we actually kind of get the word Pentecost from this idea, because after 7 weeks, then you celebrate the Feast of Weeks. Okay, and there are very specific things that are required during the Feast of Weeks. And one of them is voluntary offerings, okay? And notice that they're proportional to the amount in which the Lord has blessed you. So somebody who's perhaps poor, or their harvest was not as abundant as their neighbor or the person down the road, they're not under a burdensome obligation. They give in proportion to what they receive. So everybody gives voluntarily, but in proportion to what they receive. So that's wonderful. That's a wonderful way of doing it. So God is not unaware of our situations, and He won't overburden His people by ridiculous requirements, unlike the pagan gods around them, who it was like, this is what you give me, this is what I want, you bring it, right, on penalty of death. So that's not our God. That's not how our God operates. Verse 11.
And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you, your son, and your daughter, and your male and female slaves, and the Levite who is in your town, and the stranger, the orphan, and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where the Lord your God chooses to establish His name.
So all through the prior period, the weeks, the people are working hard. They're harvesting. They're making Passover was a time of sacrifice and things like that. And then Pentecost comes, okay, the end of the 7 sevens, and then it's a time of rejoicing. And that's the key word there. That's the operative word, rejoicing. It should be a time of rejoicing, not of drudgery, not of sorrow, not of oppression, not of obligation, but a time of joy, because the Lord has provided. It's at the end of the harvest, and the abundance of the land has yielded what it's going to leave, what it's going to give. Okay? And it's all inclusive. It's all inclusive. I know that term has become twisted and perverted and means so many weird things today, but it was a radical concept that this is a time of rejoicing when the whole land rejoices. Many, many years ago, when I was a very young Christian, we had a pastor, and he and his wife had come from Singapore. They had come from Singapore. If you know anything about Singapore, Singapore is an amazing, amazing place, right? But it's literally a cultural crossroads. There are Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Taoists and Christians there, and Jews and all. It's just a massive melting pot of cultures and stuff like that. And this couple said that they were Christians, but they said that it was an amazing thing because the Hindus would celebrate their festivals, you know, and you were aware of them, but you didn't participate. And the Buddhists would celebrate their festivals, and you were aware of it because Singapore is not that large. But you were aware of it, but maybe you would celebrate, or you'd be cordial to your fellow, or to your Buddhist friends and fellow co-workers, but you didn't necessarily celebrate it, and so on and so on and so on. But when Christmas came, everybody celebrated Christmas. Mm-hmm. They said it was amazing. Everybody went around saying Merry Christmas. Everybody did because that's what Christmas is. It's a time of joy. Emmanuel, God with us. And this is again, everything is a foreshadowing. And this is a foreshadowing of the joy that we should exude because of what Jesus did for us on the cross. And this is a good foreshadowing it. Commentary: there was no ritual or sacrifice commanded at Pentecost. It was a joyful time of thanksgiving for the harvest and a heart response to God. And boom, that is a key component of this entire 2 chapters and more that we've been studying. Gratitude, give gratefully, give generously, and joyfully. This is what God is wanting his people to do, to be joyful and grateful and generous. Mm-hmm. Rich says, Christmas is like heaven just every day. That's awesome. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, yeah. So and I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, Rich. Mm-hmm. I hope yours was phenomenal. So Leviticus, this is calling back on what was read before, but it's a reiteration of what's going on. You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath, or after 7 weeks. Then you shall present a new grain offering to the Lord. You shall bring it in from your dwelling place, 2 loaves of bread as a wave offering, and it goes into the details. But no animals are sacrificed. You make wave offering. You lift up a wave of an offering of bread. A joyous time, a joyous time. You break bread together. Okay. The church was founded on the day of Pentecost, which would include the leavened bread of the Gentiles, waved as holy before the Lord, made holy by the work of Jesus the Messiah. This is Guzik saying that. Exactly. Isn't it amazing if we stop and think about it? God had laid out these ceremonies and these rituals and these celebrations.
Festivals and celebrations,
And then Jesus comes, he fulfills all of the obligations of sacrifice. He fulfills everything. And then 50 days later, the church is formed. Mm-hmm. And we can celebrate that because God brought us into the fold. Because remember, if we go back, if I can get back there in time, in verse 11, rejoice, your son, your daughter, your slave or servants, the Levite, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow in your midst. Everyone. Stranger is just another way of saying the non-Jew, the stranger, the Gentile. Okay, and God says everybody celebrates. So yeah, this is amazing. Whoops. Yeah. So yeah. Verse 16, moving on to other festivals.
So 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place where he chooses, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Booths. Those are the 3 times. And they are not to appear before the Lord empty-handed. Everyone shall give as he is able, in accordance with the blessing of the Lord your God, which he has given you.
Right. Now, critics are going to say, wait a minute, weren't there supposed to be 4 festivals? Yeah, there's 4 festivals. There's more festivals. But God is emphasizing these 3 festivals, okay, because it's speaking of bringing out of your abundance and out of joy and not out of obligation. There are a couple of festivals that they're required to bring sacrifice, but these festivals specifically, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Booths, okay, are to be a time of generosity, i.e. don't appear empty-handed, a time of celebration, a time of festivity, a time of remembrance, a time of family, a time of gathering, a joyous time. Okay, they're to be a joyous time. And God makes provision. He says, everyone shall give as he is able. Okay, so it's not out of obligation, but it's out of ability and out of ability. So yeah. Guzik says these were only 3 of the 7 feasts of Israel. The feast not mentioned this are the Feast of Trumpets, of First Fruits, and the Day of Atonement. The feasts mentioned in this chapter were the most important feast in Israel. And here's the important part, every Jewish man, to the best of his ability, was to go to the place of the tabernacle, or the temple in later times, and celebrate this feast with the whole nation of Israel. So if an entire family couldn't go, at least the head of the household was to go and celebrate and be part of this. Okay, so yeah. verse 18.
You shall appoint yourself judges and officers in all your towns, which the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not distort justice. You shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe, because a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and distorts the words of the righteous.
Okay, we're going to end here tonight, but we'll come back next week and we'll talk to these verses in detail, because now the topic is shifting, and it's shifting to governance and how the people are to govern it. But in what we just read about generosity and gratitude, and justice is to be administered in the same way. In the same way, those who oversee justice are to be honest and to be fair and to be wise and to be righteous in their judgments. So God is setting the tone for a society that values gratitude and generosity and fairness and wisdom and honesty and integrity. And that's where we want to end. Everything that God is pointing towards is pointing his people towards being people of integrity. And so we'll pick up the narrative next week. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you so much for putting up with our little technical glitches. But celebrate, good things are happening all around us here. I mean, there's literally trenches and pipes and tools and things around us. So celebrate. 14.6 is moving forward, and 2026
Hallelujah.
is kicking off to be a great year amongst God's people. So thank you. We will see you all next week, and be blessed, and see you next week.
Yep. Come and join us if you can. 9:30 a.m. every Sunday at the Light, or 5 p.m. here at 14.6 Church.
Yep.
Coffee House this Saturday at Cozy Crepes, and then on the 18th, the Sunday, January 18th, we're having our lunch gathering at Sorrento's Italian Kitchen in Long Beach. So lots of times to connect. If you're local, we'd love to see you guys. Bless you.
Good night.